I just watched, and I didn't just watch. I just read a book, in particular, which is called "How Music Got Free" because it was recommended by Anna's Archive. You know, and I read it on Library Genesis, but it's by Stephan Witt, who confesses, to having been part of the pirate underground in IRC, much like myself. Although, of course, I came into the industry a lot later, having been born in 1986, not, a graduating class of 1997, like the artist of this particular book. I absorbed it. I read it. I read the whole thing tonight, and I thought that it was interesting. You know, and you know, this was insane. I mean, it talks about how an entire generation commits the same crime, how the music industry is a riveting story of obsession, music, crime, and money, and featuring visionaries and criminals, moguls and tech-savvy teenagers, and the greatest pirate in history, the most powerful executive in music business, and the revolutionary invention of an illegal website 4 times the size of the iTunes music store. And this journalist like begins to talk about it. He really gets into it, and he talks about how he's part of the MP3 generation and everything. And I read it and I walked away from it, and I thought that it was funny because the more that I looked into it, the more that it seemed like one of the things that really kind of did the music business in a number to the music business was the fact that and one of the reasons why these cockroaches, were so incredibly reluctant to actually adopt the MP3 technology and give us something better than compact disc at that point was that they were literally like tied and tethered to the CD in such a way that breaking free from it would was just incredibly costly and expensive for the music business, which just literally couldn't afford to do what they were doing short of compact disc and selling CDs. And it got me thinking. You know, I went to the store to Best Buy a while back with my sister because she needed a new computer, and we were looking over all the models, and she was like, "I can't even find one here that has what a CD tray in it, and I really want one that actually has something like that in it." And it got me. It was so incredibly frustrating, being there and realizing that the tech guy was basically saying that in order to actually get a compact disc player, you'd have to, separately order it and plug it in over USB, or into your laptop. And like if you buy a computer, this is not this, the idea of installing a Blu-ray burner is going to be an afterthought, in everything, especially for me. I mean, I might need it in the future, but right now, no. Like, but it just you have artists these days that literally like they can't make money outside of CD sales, and it's like, what am I gonna do with the CD? Like, if I look at this computer that I've got, this laptop that I'm lifting up and speaking to you on, like, there is nowhere to put that in. There's no jukebox in here either because in order like in order to consolidate space, I would have naturally gotten rid of devices that rarely got used. I just would not have wanted to hold on to that. But it got me thinking back to the history of, having CDs. And it's like, we used to have these big binders because over time, the jewel cases were just too massive because, you'd end up with thousands of them. And then the jewel boxes cases had to be boxed up and put in storage, at some point, and just boxed up and put in a shed or somewhere else, away from the rest of us because it's too bulky in space. And what killed me, walking away from all this and watching it and reading it was just that if I had one chief and salient point to make about online piracy of music is that even today it if you want mobile storage that can, actually go with you, if you want to own something that you can actually take with you and play in like the car or something, it's still, over USB with a USB key within our Prius or something. It's still, it's got a port for it, but it got me thinking about all this, and it blew my mind that you've got an industry that still seems to be utterly tethered to these diskettes that just don't, we don't even have anything to plug them into and play anymore. And in order to get something that would do that, I would literally have to go out of my way to order a special drive that would plug into my laptop over USB, and also, over the SATA connections into my computer, that's out there in the other room. It doesn't have a thing for optical media at all, and I don't have a boombox anymore. That stuff got tossed, over the years. Our car doesn't have a place to plug it into. Like it, it's it's ridiculous. Like we've got an utterly absurd business model that doesn't even make sense in 2020, that has just completely disintegrated. And it got me thinking back. I for one have tried to popularize the idea with the iPods of reflashing the firmware with Roxbox, because I found it to be an ultimately, when I hackerwared my my iPod back in the day, it was able to support a broader range of file formats, which by that point, the MP3, I mean, it's still out there, but FLACs are becoming more and more common, and lossless audio. Now that we've got a compression algorithm, and hard disk drives have shot up so much in, terms of storage space. We'd been moving over and in the to the direction of lossless audio, not with waves but with FLAC files, and Roxbox natively had support for that. So you'd just get an iPod Classic and reflash it with Roxbox, basically breathing new life into the device, which made it, a much better experience, because the people that were behind it actually were hip to that sort of thing. Apple, to its credit, as much as I hate them these days as a company, like they at least gave us the fucking iPod, you know, for that took MP3s mobile. They just blinded themselves to the scale of, what piracy was like, and ignored it. And I good for them on that one. Obviously, like, there are separate industries that we're talking about here. The tech space isn't necessarily beholden to, the music industry, and there doesn't have to be incestuous relationships that exist between these two industries. So, eventually a CD burner, or eventually a portable MP3 player was born. And the iPod is not the only example, but it's the iconic example of an MP3 player. It's the one that everybody thinks of when they think about MP3 players these days. Like, there were other people that were making them, but let's be honest, I can't remember who they were. I can't. But it got me thinking about them, and what I came away from it. They're not even necessarily this big as these phones, but they store, thousands and thousands and thousands of albums can be stored on one of those things. They can store, thousands of hours of music, and yet, a compact disc can only store like 12, tracks on it. And it got me thinking about these giant binders that we had to fill up with the stuff, and the way that, all those inserts, why they would attract some sort of attention from you and make you want to preserve them. They also introduce the hassle of having to keep them out of harm's way. I mean, hello, most of us have drinks around as we're using our devices. If one of those were to incidentally spill and a CD were up on somewhere, you'd have to immediately go and run for the towels to go soak it up. And, God forbid the album inserts were, in the path of that. And, you know, for all the supposed value that was added from this experience, and for all the ways that other people talk about them, like, oh god, I don't like MP3s because like I just like the experience of actually owning a CD myself, and I'm starting to think I don't. You know, like that thought's going through my head now. The fact is that I honestly think that one of the grave sins of the music business that led to its wide scale disruption by the pirates was that CDs are just too much of a fucking hassle. I mean, especially now in 2020, where like in order to get a device that can even play them, I have to go, out and order a special device that uses wires that connects to my laptop over a wired connection. Like, do you not? How can you not see the fucking problem? And the government spent over 10 years trying to take down Rabid Neurosis. Like, it had been investigating, and it only because of like one member of an adjacent release group were they even able to make a segue into dealing with them, because they had one guy in particular that had been able to maintain a decent relationship with Rabid Neurosis, and then they get them all, and they're at trial and everything. You know, like, this is just absolutely absurd. It's an obscene business that doesn't make any sense in 2020, and you've got artists that are now asking, how can I sell CDs, and my answer is you don't. Y- you know, it's really that simple. CDs are a great big hassle. No, like, I don't want them. And the truth of the matter is that MP3s are just more convenient, and it's more convenient to go through the work of tracking them down than it is to bother with your paying for your CDs. And this is what they've done. They've made the experience of actually paying for their work too much of a hassle. One of the great utilities of the iPod is that it can store a lot, whereas a compact disc in the file formats that you guys were dependent on just can't.